Hey everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. So, today we're going to talk about more of the Americans spreading out into the middle of the country. Because we have talked about how the Native Americans have been eradicated, and that was the mentality of the United States government leading up to this, is to get rid of the Native Americans to make way for the Americans. We talked about that yesterday and the horrificness that involved. Today we're going to talk about, hey, there's all this open land now. And so you would think that people would be like morally upset about the fact that why is all this land available now? But they're not. They're like, oh, well, let's just blinders on for the past and moving forward. So there is no guilt by any of the settlers that we talk about today over, hey, how did you get all this land? So it just doesn't get talked about. But let's talk about some of the stuff today as America does spread out in the middle of the country and some of the issues that they dealt with when they did that. All right, let me make myself a little smaller here. Boop, 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 boop. So more settlers to the west. The west is really anything off the east coast as you move further west to what is present day considered the Midwest. Your Kansas, Dakotas, Wyomings, Montanas, Iowa, Nebraska. These places that we call the Midwest today is the areas that are going to start getting populated at the time. Now, let me show you a picture here because this is important here. I'll make myself a little bigger because I got some room. There's two big things that have come out, two inventions that are going to fundamentally change the Americans' ability to survive in the middle of the country. So starting at this point up to present day, the middle of the country, they farm. They farm food. America, I believe, and you can Google this and make me look dumb. I'm pretty confident America is like far and away the world's leading producer of corn. All right. To the extent that so much stuff in America is made from corn. High fructose corn syrup, like sugar, is come from corn. We make tons of stuff out of corn because we have so much corn. That's really going to start at this time period. Tons of land to farm on. Now, the Native Americans were never able to farm on the land out in the middle of the country because it didn't have consistent rainfall. It wasn't a problem of having land or soil or even the amount of water in the middle of the country. The problem is that it might not rain for 3 months and all of a sudden just be like almost a flood level for 2 weeks. And it's really unpredictable in the middle of the country. Because of that, the Indians never had the ability to farm. The Americans have a new invention, a new concept that is going to be heavily used in the middle of the country that's going to change all that. This thing. It's a windmill. You're like, oh, windmills. So windmills aren't necessarily new. Windmills have been around for a really long time. But why? What do windmills do? Well, windmills can do a lot of things. You're like, well, they spin. Yeah, but why do they spin? Now, you might have one just because it looks cool. All right. But here's why it's really important to have a windmill. When that spins, all right, you can use it as a machine. Like right, this little connector. So there's something spinning that you have no effort on, and it can just spin. And what do you want it to do? Well, what windmills did in the middle of the country, big old pipe goes into the ground. It pumps the water out of the ground. So there's wells deep down in the ground. You can pump that water out, and you can fill up these reservoirs, and you can use this water to water all your crops when it doesn't rain. So there's always water underground because there's no shortage of like annual rainfall. It just didn't rain on top of the ground consistently. Sometimes it did, sometimes it doesn't. The windmills and being able to water crops consistently is a game changer in the middle of the country. Another big invention that's going to come out is the steel plow. Now we're going to talk about in the next lesson, steel becomes more affordable with this thing called the Bessemer process. Well, one of the most beneficial things that steel does is makes a steel plow. So not all this is steel. This is wood all here, but this part right here is steel. It's unbreakable. It's lighter. is extremely durable. It can last for generations. Prior to that, the plows here are made either of wood, which would rot, or they're made of iron, which were brittle and hit a big rock and it would break. Steel doesn't do either one of those. And yeah, steel plows were expensive, but you get one, it would last you, again, for a generation. The steel plow came up and allowed the area in the center of the country to be tilled up very easy. You have to till the earth up to loosen up the soil so that what you're growing gets water and nutrients and all that, and it gets aerated. So plowing is really, really important, and the steel plow makes it easier to till up the soil in the middle of the country. So now, anybody that wanted to move out into the middle of absolute nowhere, all right, and maybe still have angry Indians in the area, can if they want to. Yeah, how many people do you think want to do that? Like, nobody. Like, and who's going to pack up and go try to buy land in the middle of the country? The government knows this. The government also realizes they would love for people to pack up and move out to the middle of the country. Because if you're a factory worker in the east coast of the United States, you might have 2 or 3 kids, because that's all you can afford to feed. All right. If you lived on a farm, you might have 10, 12 kids. Ask your grandparents how many brothers and sisters they had, or your great grandparents, and it's like some astronomical number of brothers and sisters. And a lot of times that's because they lived on farms, and you need all that work. There ain't no slavery, but your kids, you can have as many mandatory workers as you want if they're your own kids. The United States government wants the population to increase. The reason the United States government wants the population to increase, there's more people working, there's more people paying taxes, and the government gets stronger. So the United States government wants people to move out into the middle of the country and be farmers. That way they'll have more kids. When you have more people, you need more food, but that's fine. If they're all farmers, they're all growing food. So here's how the government is going to try to kill all these birds with one stone. It is something called the Homestead Act. Let me bring myself down like that. The Homestead Act. All right. The Homestead Act's out for a really long time. I was unaware until I started doing some research that it goes all the way into the 20th century. But really in the late 1800s, what the Homestead Act does, anybody here, and when I say anybody, I'm meaning anybody here, all right, who wanted to move out into the middle of nowhere, all right, can, and the United States government will not only encourage you to do this, they will give you 160 acres of land to do so. So if you're a northern factory worker and you're desperately trying to survive like on pennies a day, if you just pack up and move out into the middle of nowhere, the government will give you 160 acres of land. The only catch is that you have to live on that land for 5 years at least. Like so, they'll give it to you. You don't have to make any payments on it for 5 years. All right. But if you farm on it for 5 years and you build a house, right, is what's called the Homestead Act. You have to build a house on that land and farm it for 5 years. It's free. You never have to pay anything, and it's yours to do whatever you want to after that. All right. You want to sell it? That's fine for 5 years. How many people, dirt poor, took advantage of this? Tons. This up to 30% of the United States land was settled because of the Homestead Act. Tons of people are going to pack up and move out west. It starts to feel like, hey, there's this American dream. Now, I want to show you a picture here. This is random. Random lot assignment. So 160 acres of land, and they just gave them out in perfect squares, like one after another. So they're just filling them up. So it's kind of, luck of the draw when you get out there, I guess, on how great your land is. I would imagine if you got out there and there was like a pond on your land, they would just give you another piece of land because they want you to be successful. Because if you're successful, you're going to have more kids. They're going to grow up, pay more taxes. You're going to have more food to provide for the whole country. Everything is great. High fives as these guys go out there. However, if you're an Irish immigrant and you've been working in a shoe factory, and you go out into the middle of nowhere to farm, guess what you don't know how to do? Farm. Yeah, you've never been a farmer before ever. You don't have any idea how to farm. So what the United States government is going to do to remedy this problem, since people went out the Homestead Act, all right, and they want to farm, is they pass another act called the Morrill Land Grant Act. What the Morrill Land Grant Act does is provides money all right, for colleges in the same area where the Homestead Act is, all right. Let me show you this is present day. These are colleges that were founded with money from the Morrill Land Grant Act. Look at all of these colleges up here, all right? Like the University of Nebraska, all right? So all of these colleges are founded with the Morrill Land Grant Act. But here's the catch. If you take money from the Morrill Land Grant Act to create your college in the middle of the country, you have to teach all these homesteaders how to grow food. So if you lived out here in Nebraska and took your land here in Nebraska and you don't know how to farm, you can go to the University of Nebraska. Now, you're not getting like a college degree, but you go at night and be like, hey, how do I grow things? And they, on top of having school every day, they at night will teach farmers how to actually grow stuff in their area. And if farmers are really struggling, I think they'll go out and help them out. There's all of this help to help farmers learn how to be farmers. All right, because they understand education is important when you're trying to do something as important as growing food for everybody. So the Morrill Land Grant Act is extremely beneficial. All right, now there's a unique story with this that leads to another story. So while all the people who moved out here who had access to all these colleges could grow all the food they wanted, there's a group that didn't have access to the colleges. Black people, freedmen. So the Homestead Act was open to freedmen as well. So if you're an ex-slave, the United States government's like, hey, we'll give you 160 acres of land. How many freedmen took advantage of that? Quite a few. All right. The problem is that all these colleges, black people couldn't go to them. So you move out here in the middle of the country, you guys already know how to farm. You're not allowed to go to these same colleges. Where a lot of the, almost, I won't say all, I would say 80% of the freedmen who took advantage of the Homestead Act are going to very heavily settle here in Kansas. All right. Now, the reason Kansas is important, all right, because Kansas is technically the North. It is freed slaves trying to get out of the South. So to them, today we just consider Kansas the Midwest, but to them this is the North because this was a free state before the Civil War. They're getting to the North. Kansas can grow cotton because the freedmen who move out here, what they already know how to do is grow cotton. They don't know how to grow corn or wheat or soybeans or any of these other things that some of these other people are learning how to grow. They know how to grow cotton, and there ain't no help coming. So they had to be further south to where the environment lets them grow cotton. You can't grow cotton up here. It's too cold. So Kansas, while it's technically the North, is southern enough that a lot of the freedmen who came from the South are going to move to Kansas in order to grow cotton. They have a unique name given to them. They are called the Exodusters. All right. So the Exodusters are black freedmen, all right, who move out at the time, and Kansas is the main. There's other places that they went to. The reason they're called Exodusters is because it's a religious meaning from the book of the Bible of Exodus, which is the whole story of Moses leading his people to the promised land. They're like, hey, we're done being slaves. Here's land promised to us. So freed slaves that took advantage of the Homestead Act are considered Exodusters. And a lot of them did have success, even with the fact that they weren't allowed at the colleges because of the racial policies with the Morrill Land Grant Act. A lot of them did know how to grow cotton already. This is a photograph of some freedmen who had moved out and taken advantage of the Homestead Act. Most likely, these guys are in Kansas. All right. So when the Homestead Act worked absolutely fantastic. Well, then they're like, you know who else would benefit from this? Indians. Let's help out the Indians. How about we give the Indians 160 acres of land too? All right. I do think that when this idea came up to give Indians 160 acres of land, it came from a good place. If we had a heart this big, maybe it came from the idea of it is going to be an absolute disaster. All right. It's called the Dawes Act. Sometimes you're going to see this called the Dawes-Severalty Act. It means the same thing. The Dawes Act, D-A-W-E-S, all right, the Dawes Act, is going to be, it's like the Homestead Act for Indians, all right? Now, first off, it was the leftover land that people hadn't taken on the Homestead Act, all right? So this picture I have here of Senator Henry Dawes, it says implied Indians were inferior to white waves, which isn't wrong. So what the idea is you give each Indian family 160 acres of land, completely discounting the fact that Indian tribes live as a community. Yes, they have families, but you have multiple families in the same houses, and so the way their community works is different than the American and the European community. They are truly a community. When you want to divide them up in 160 acre sections, it's not very effective. Also, they can't use the Morrill Land Grant Act colleges because they're not white. They don't know how to farm to begin with, like the Exodusters did. So it's completely useless to them. But when the United States government shows up to say, hey, do you Indians want land? Right? We'll get rid of your reservations. Do you want land? They're like, sure. Now, land ownership is a kind of a foreign concept anyway, but they're like, sure. So the government gives the Indians land. Then the Indians realize they can turn around and sell it to somebody for like $15. Maybe somebody that already took their 160 acres in the Homestead Act that wants an additional 160 acres. They'll just buy it from an Indian for like just a little bit of money. The Indians, they're like, all right, cool. I got something for free. I got some money from it. I feel like I won. Well, guess what ends up happening? All that land that was given to the Indians immediately gets taken from the Indians by what's called speculators. People that are trying to take the land and then either make a profit off of it or sell it later for more money. And all of a sudden, the Dawes Act, which because America is like, hey, here's how we're going to handle the Indian problem, basically gets rid of the idea of reservations, gives all the Indians land through the Dawes Act, and then the Indians, because they don't have the ability to farm on it, then sell it or give it away. This is a poster saying Indian land for sale. Like, come get it. This map right here shows, so the black areas on the map show how much land Indians owned. In 1850, that's how much land they owned. 1865, into the Civil War. Then, in 15 years, with the Homestead Act and then the Dawes Act, this is what happened, right? Absolutely devastating to the amount of land that they own, and it was just taken from them. It was like the land was taken from them and then given back to them in a very specific way that doesn't suit their culture, and it all just disappears. The consistent attempt to force Native Americans to live a certain way never works out well in the United States. All right, Oklahoma. So Oklahoma has its own unique little story that I want to tell you. So let me go back up here to a map, show you where Oklahoma is at. All right, so Oklahoma is right here. All right, so Oklahoma is going to get settled a little differently than the Homestead Act. All right, instead of having all the areas predetermined, all right, who gets what, they're just going to let people go out and pick their own land. Nothing bad can happen with this. So let me go back down here. This here is the map of Oklahoma. It doesn't jut out here yet with the panhandle like it'll eventually have. So this particular area right here in the center is great farmland. Well, what they're going to do is they're going to, on the day of October 22nd, 1889, anybody who wants the land out here has to line up and down this line right here. And there's a guy out there with a shotgun. So first thing in the morning, all right, on April 22nd, he's going to be like, bang! All right, boom! Fire a shotgun in the air, and everybody here is going to go running across this land, and any land that they see, they can have. All right, these guys are called boomers. All right, because boom in the air. To clarify, the term boomers that you may hear now refer to people that were born during the baby boom era after World War II in like the 1950s. Not the same people. All right. These are called boomers because they took off running when the boom of the shotgun happened. Just this is a really small group of people in Oklahoma. What they realized, though, is that as all these boomers go running across here to find the best land, all the best land already has been taken. So everybody's given a flag, all right? And they've been given a flag the night before, so they run out there, find their land, they're like, this is my land, all right? Well, the very first people who take off out here, as they're running across, they get to the best land and they realize there's already a flag there. And they're like, there's no way this guy outran me. Like, I was at the head of the line. How did that happen? They realize what has happened. They realize that they have got out there too late, that there are people who cheated. They snuck across too soon. All right. They actually came in the middle of the night, snuck across here and into the territory of Oklahoma. And because they went over too soon, they're nicknamed the Sooners. Because there's the boomers, and then there's the people that went too soon that are called Sooners. So there's boomers and Sooners. So Sooners are basically cheaters. All right. Which is really weird that nowadays Oklahoma, all right, has a football team, or they have a college, all right, with a football team. Their mascot is the Oklahoma Sooners, all right. So the Oklahoma Sooners, it's kind of odd that the Oklahoma Sooners are called the Oklahoma Sooners, considering the fact that they're basically like the Oklahoma Cheaters. It's kind of weird on that one, how they would do that. But so they are, I think their fight song is Boomer Sooner. So Oklahoma got settled a little differently than the other ones with the Homestead Act. That's as far as we're going to get today. I know it's a little short, so you're welcome. I will see you guys tomorrow.